by saying that how does DCA management and approach to damage-causing predators link onto stewardship? So I think we all realize that any healthy ecosystem is totally dependent on the whole suite of predators to keep everything in balance. So they are integral, great part of any ecosystem. And good field management links directly to the availability of prey species and habitat for both predators and prey species. And that eventually have an impact on how, depending on how you manage it on predation on your property. And there's also a lot of negotiations with landowners and awareness raising events, very similar and also linking to stewardship, to get people to do best practice, because that's what it's all about. And so we can carry on. And I want to start by giving you guys an example of where this whole idea of holistic management came from, where I had a mind shift or a mind change. And I started the first leopard conservation area in the mid-80s in the Cederberg. And I was tasked to try and limit or minimize the number of stock losses in the Clanwilliam, Citrusdal, Cederberg general area, which at that stage was about 450 to 600 small stock every year, and about 70 large stock, which includes horses and donkeys and cattle. And the second objective was to implement actions so that less leopards are being killed. So when I started there, I was very excited, and the moment I started moving around in the Cederberg area, I realized there's very, very little leopard activity at that stage, and it was a huge concern to me. So we got the assistance of Chris and Tilda Stewart. Chris is an old CapeNature colleague. You probably know them. They've published all these beautiful field guides and coffee table books, and good friends of mine, and they assisted me, and we did eventually did a spoor count over a 48-hour period with lots of planning and training beforehand, divided the whole area into small grids, and certain people were responsible for certain transects in those grids to monitor over a 48-hour period all leopard activity. And after the data was analyzed, the shock came. There were only between 16 and 18 leopards in the whole of the Cederberg wilderness area and adjacent properties. So at that stage, I've already asked for all the records of permits being issued. And at that stage, there were 27 permits issued to landowners to eradicate leopards. So there were more permits issued than we actually had animals left in the whole wilderness area. And that was where I had a mind shift and decided that the killing and continuous killing of predators causing stock losses is not the way to go. We need to think differently. And this is where the holistic approach idea started. So I just want to get my mouse to work. Okay, so I've got a problem. Let's do it this way. Okay, so the content of my presentation, we'll look at a statement of intent and responsibility of conservation authorities. We look a little bit at, we will look at ethics, our history and what happened in the past, the current situation and the different role of predators in the landscape, holistic principles and mitigation management, and then a summary. So I want to start by, and also looking at the road ahead, I want to start by the statement that for the past 350 plus years, we've tried to eradicate predators from our farms, from our rural areas. But today, if we look back, stock losses are still escalating, especially the small predator numbers are increasing. So somewhere we are doing something seriously wrong. And I just want to mention that even in the early settlers' time, leopards, for example, were all over the landscape in the Cape Peninsula area, and Rondebosch was one of the hotspots according to historical records. And even in those times, they've issued a bounty for, which they call tigers, for every tiger killed 20 riksdaler. And that actually stood until 1974, when the first legislation in our ordinance came out to protect leopards. So it's been many years of prosecution, not just leopards, but all other predators, and we've lost the larger Cape lion and the hyena species, the spotted hyena in the Western Cape. We still got brown hyena. Fortunately, they're coming back. So this is just a statement of introduction to this whole approach. So let's look at the statement of intent. So we realize that some wild animals do cause losses to property and damage to property and losses to agricultural commodities. And we also realize that we as a conservation authority have still a huge role to play in the management of damage causing animals. And we've got a duty to advise landowners to practice best practice, so that whatever they do is ecologically acceptable to us and that it doesn't impact negatively on our natural ecosystems. And an important part of our mandate is to ensure sustainable utilization of our natural resources. And everything we do must be done, it must be justifiable scientifically and ethically. And then we also realize, and we also had to broadcast that the managing wildlife or wild animals that are causing losses to the agricultural sector is an integral part of the producer's production process. It's not our animals. We just assist in managing them and also protect the bigger systems, but it's the primary responsibility of the landowner who farms in that area to manage and protect. So the responsibility of the authorities, or our responsibility, is to support and initiate research programs. Fortunately, for many years, there were very little done in the field of damage-causing animals. But fortunately, since the Cape Leopard Trust, our partners, and some of the universities came on board, fantastic research is being done in the landscape, which in many cases just confirm what we've been practicing over all of these years. Participation in extension programs aimed at reducing or eliminating losses by means of efficient, effective, and ecologically acceptable mitigation measures. Then also to participate in training, a little bit of what we're doing now, but also for our managers. We do damage-causing wildlife training every year with the CapeNature staff to inform them of the newest and the latest innovations, and to ensure that they carry that message over to the private sector and to the landowners. Then not so much our responsibility, but where there's a need also to supply or share equipment such as a trap cage to farmers, even if they just want to copy it, and make sure that whatever they are using is acceptable to us and can manage in a humane way. And then I think we provide the legal framework for landowners to be able to manage when they do experience problems. So ethics is I think a very important part of damage-causing animal management, and I think we've got a huge responsibility to ensure that it's always done in an ethical way. So this statement of Bateman whenever man engages in a practice which puts the lives of his fellow creatures in jeopardy, he has a moral obligation to examine his motives carefully and to assess the methods he proposes to employ. And we as CapeNature will only support practices that are humane, ecologically acceptable, that is absolutely selective and legal and approved, and also cost effective, not just from the landowner's point of view, but also from our point of view. We have limited resources. So if we say cost effective, in short, what this means is the actual cost of the management action after losses has been experienced should not exceed the actual cost of the losses. And we see in many cases landowners, and it's understandable when they lose livestock, they want to retaliate, and they do it at all costs. And these costs, most of the time, totally exceed the actual losses that they've experienced. And it just doesn't make sense. Eventually, he's already got a hole in his pocket, and it just makes that hole bigger. And it also makes people angry. So it's important to just warn them not to exceed the actual cost of the losses. So if we look at a natural system schematically presented here of a simple undisturbed ecosystem as it was before man started farming commercially in the landscape, we had the Cape lion and the larger predators. Fortunately, we still have the leopard. We had the smaller scavengers and smaller predators. We had a very, very good solid prey base of medium-sized antelope in the landscape, and then the smaller herbivores and rodents. And we had a healthy ecosystem reducing for everything above this pyramid. So when the first people moved in, it was just teeming with game animals. And we've got these historic photos and records of people just going on and hunting as if it will last forever. And an example is 350 blesbok and springbok shot in one day. Africa was considered a hunting paradise for overseas people, and they all came to Africa to come and experience this fantastic hunting experience. And very soon, also that level of larger antelope was in direct competition with the stock farmers in terms of food in the field, and they hunted them for food and also tried to eradicate them to sort out the competition with the livestock. And very soon we lost most of that layer of the pyramid. And the first one to go was the blauwbok. It was extinct. Apologies. It was extinct even before we realized that it was the last one that was shot. And that layer was replaced with livestock. And we've got a lot of historic evidence of how people try to get rid of the larger predators still in the landscape. We've got these old wolf traps or leopard traps in the Cederberg. We've got a whole array of even bear gin traps that were confiscated. So there's a lot of historic evidence of what happened to these animals in the past. So after the larger predators were basically removed from the system, man actually took over that position. And very few of the predators were eventually left. And today we're fortunate enough to have the leopard here as the alpha predator, and caracal, black-backed jackal, eagles, and some of the smaller predators. And the prey base are here, but it's not nearly what it was in the past. So we realize that predators do cause stock losses. But the killing of a predator has never been a long-term solution to stock losses, and we've seen it over and over again. You can't just shoot the problem away. The problem comes back, and many a time it's a bigger problem than the one you sorted out. My apologies. I have to use my mouse, so it tends to jump more than one slide at a time. So if we look at the social behavior of predators, what do we learn from that from a landowner point of view? So if we again look at leopard as an example, they have got huge territories. And on average in the Cederberg, I think it was something in the vicinity of 500 square kilometers. And we had one male that had a territory of over 1,000 square kilometers. That's huge, and it stretches over many farm properties. So what does this mean to a landowner? In each of these territories where you have a dominant male, there will be a couple of handful of females depending on the size, and they each got their home range. And these predators defend those properties aggressively to its species of the same species, animals of the same species, and also they don't tolerate competition. So they also keep the smaller predators on the tip of their toes. So if you are a landowner and you farm in an area where there's a dominant leopard male and say, for example, 2 females in that that's got home ranges in that territory, you've got 3 animals that you have to try and prevent stock losses from. But the moment you remove one of those, especially the dominant males, you create a vacuum. And we've seen in this case where this male of which had a territory of 1,070 square kilometers, he was unfortunately illegally killed. And we had at that stage at Dr. Quentin Martins had quite a lot of trail cameras out in the area. And within a 48-hour period, we had 6 new faces that we've never picked up on any of the trail cameras coming to compete for that vacuum that was created by the removal of that single male. Now you've got 6 or 7 new animals. They don't know the area very well. They will probably take the easiest available prey. And the chances of you having an escalation in your stock loss is extremely good. Now these animals communicate in many ways. We'll talk about pheromones a little bit later in the next presentation, but they make noises that we can't even hear, and they communicate, and they know immediately if that dominant animal is not in the area anymore, and they will come and try and fill that vacuum. And so I've mentioned they also, in areas where leopards are settled, they immediately sort out the lesser competition. And so they've got a major role to play in keeping things in balance. And they, in a great way, suppress breeding by not allowing, depending on the food availability and if it's a good year, only certain females will breed. We can learn such a lot. We've heard a lot this morning about the use of trail cameras. And thank you to my colleagues for sharing some of these photos with me. So trail cameras are a fantastic way of learning what is happening on your land. You can get an amazing amount of information by using these cameras. And predators have got a very important role to play in a healthy ecosystem. They remove sick and injured animals, and they, by doing that, control the spread of disease. They remove carcasses of dead animals and prevent the spreading of blue flies and stuff like that. They control rodents and other prey. And their numbers can be an indicator of the health of the ecosystem, but the knife cut both ways. If you look at properties in the Karoo where they are prosecuted and hunted on a very regular basis, and newest research show that tend to increase their numbers. So if you have too many of them on your property, it's also an indication of disturbance. But in a natural system, they also keep stray or dispersing predators of the same species away. And that can work towards the landowner or in his favor. And there will be less stock losses because they won't allow any stray animals coming onto your property. And they also suppress breeding, and I have mentioned it, especially with the smaller predators. Depending on the prey availability, only certain animals will breed and not all of them. And the moment they are prosecuted, they all breed because you're losing that social dominant structure. and it leads to an increase in predator numbers on your property. So we had a workshop in 2006 and again in 2013 at Gansekra, where we discussed this whole holistic DCA management. And I think it was the first time where we had everybody, all the role players around one table. So it was conservation, all the NGOs, the farmers, I call them activists, but the people that's really against killing of any form of life. And we had the national departments there. And the 4 key principles that underpinned the workshop was that no species as a whole can be designated as problematic, but only specific individuals within that species. So don't target the species. It's not the species that's the problem. It may be 1 or 2 individuals of that species. And then legal and injurious techniques to kill or capture such individuals may no longer be promoted or utilized. And we got co-ops to get rid of the horrible chin traps with the serrated jaws or the spikes in the jaws. And the overall key principle upon which the workshop was convened is that prevention is the cure. That was the buzzword to solve human-wildlife conflict. Killing is not the long-term solution. And also, it was decided that a scientific assessment must be done to look at all previous research and also alternative methods. And this, in part, stimulated a lot of research. And the first publication of the scientific assessment was published. And yeah, I'm not going to go into the detail. So if we look at the holistic approach, which we say prevention is the cure, there is a 5-step approach that we all of us that's dealing with damage causing wildlife, not just predators, should follow. And firstly, we should understand the origin of the problem. What causes this problem? What is behind it? Is it husbandry of animals, or is it really a rogue animal that's learned to only kill livestock? We must understand. So there's a lot of work captured in this groundwork that we need to do before we can understand the origin of the problem. Secondly, all parties involved must maintain the correct attitude and also respect towards the wildlife that is causing the damage. It's no use just going out and poison to get rid of the problem. We need to respect all wildlife, and we need to have the correct approach and the correct attitude as humans. Thirdly, the problem must be thoroughly evaluated, and the wild animal responsible for the damage or the losses must be identified correctly. And my second presentation will deal specifically with this, to identify firstly the species of animal responsible, and also in a way to allow for the identification of a single individual of that species. Fourthly, it's crucial to implement protective measures against possible damage, and there's a whole suite of mitigation measures today in the market, and mostly were developed by landowners who experience losses, and they work. We must just use them, and we must use them always in combination and change regularly. Don't keep on using one thing, otherwise it won't work for long. And then lastly, if all mitigation fails and you've exhausted all possible mitigation and you still experience losses, then we can start looking at a possible lethal control by removing that single individual of the species that is causing the losses. So it all starts with proper soil grazing and veld management. And if I have to ask the question, what is the basic diet of a black-backed jackal in a natural system? You would probably all say, the farmers will say sheep, lambs, and but if you really look in a natural system and you look at the droppings, you will see that a huge percentage of those droppings consist out of felt fruit and rodents and insects. So it tells us something. So if you look at rodents, you need grass and seeds and fruit on your property to enable to have a good population of rodents, because they are totally dependent on that. So if you don't rest your veld and allow it to be overgrazed, you won't have any of those. Your seeds, your grasses won't have time to reseed. And if there's sheep in all the camps and there's not areas rested, they will utilize those fruit long before it's ripe. You need to rest your veld properly to enable the veld to rejuvenate itself. Natural prey species are also highly selective feeders, and they most of the time cannot compete with large flocks of sheep. I especially talk about the smaller antelope, the duiker, and the grijsbok and the steenbok. So it's important to have certain areas for certain periods where there's no sheep to allow also for these prey species to survive there. And a decrease in prey species will automatically lead to an increase in predation levels. That's just as common sense. If there's no other food to eat, you will pay the price because your lambs will be next in line. So we've talked about the mitigation tools, and there's a whole suite of them on the market. And we've experienced that you have to change them regularly. You have to use them in combination with each other. And it will probably not stop your stock losses totally, but at least it will reduce the stock losses to a point where you can probably live with it. Another important thing is to protect the natural prey on your land. I know there are still farmers that allow farm workers to hunt the smaller animals for the pot, and it's a very bad practice. Especially your leopard and your caracal are dependent on these species, and especially birds. Guinea fowl are the main prey species of our caracals in the landscape. Another important factor is not to use your marginal veld for grazing, or you can use it, but don't let your animals stay overnight in those areas without supervision or without crowling them properly. Those are the areas where our predators have been driven into and where they feel safe and survive. So the moment you let your small stock sleep over without supervision in those areas, you put them in direct conflict, and you will have losses for certain. The most important time of the year is when our stock are lambing, and then you need special care and special provision to have those animals as close to your homestead as possible, where you can keep an eye on them and prevent predation, especially that first 3 weeks of lambing. The lambs are what we call in Afrikaans the paplam stage, where they are very susceptible to predation, and it's important to look after your stock well during that period. So if all mitigation measures fail, so you've implemented everything, you've exhausted everything, and you're still experiencing losses, then you need to start targeting that individual animal that's responsible for the losses. So what we found, and Donnie and Corneille and Michael can confirm, the CapeNature staff, we've seen it with leopard. So if we've implemented all the mitigation measures, we do proper carcass evaluation, and there's still animals coming through after everything has been implemented and still causing losses, there's normally a problem. Not always, but there's normally a problem, either a dental problem, an old age problem, or something in those lines. And then we target that specific animal and not the species. So ensure that you always act within the legal framework provided by CapeNature. And as I've mentioned, we will only support you in management methods that are humane, selective, ecologically acceptable, legal, there's a whole range of them, and prevent the unselective killing of predators. In other words, don't label the species, target the species, target the single individuals. By removing predators unselectively, like in this photograph, you cause a huge disturbance in the natural balance, and you will probably promote the increase of certain species, especially the smaller predators, and you will pay the price eventually for that in terms of stock losses. The use of poison is totally illegal. Many people still grab the easiest solution because they're really getting desperate when they're losing stock, and it's totally illegal and it's totally unacceptable. And the fines for these, when you are caught, is extremely high, and it's absolutely not worth it. It's got a huge impact on the functioning of an ecological system. When you use poison there, it impacts a whole chain reaction on a lot of other animals as well, not just on the predators. So in a summary, what can be done to minimize stock losses? I don't have the answers to stop them. As long as we've got predators and we've got livestock in the natural system, we'll probably experience stock losses, but at least we can try and minimize them. And it all starts with proper soil grazing and general veld management. It's about ensuring proper husbandry practices. And I know in extensive areas like in the Karoo, it's extremely difficult, but you still, as I've said right in the beginning, it's the landowner's responsibility to manage those animals and to protect them against predation. You can't just leave them there and expect not to have problems. So you've got a responsibility towards them to do proper husbandry practices. And that includes not just prowling them at night. There's a whole range like Anatolian dogs and other shepherd dogs and shepherd animals that you can use, as well as the electronic and other manual devices. Conserve the natural prey and the habitat on your property to ensure that there's enough natural prey for predators. And implement the mitigation tools. Have a toolbox of a whole range of these things, and always use them in combination. And we need to think out of the box, and we've developed some tools here just by knowing the predators and how they operate, like simple devices that got a huge impact on predation. So think out of the box. You must just never run out of ideas. And then always operate within the legal framework. Do not kill predators unselectively. It will probably have more of an impact on your stock losses than you will realize. And always try to target the individual animal and not the species. So these animals operate not just on your property, like you've seen with the leopard. They occupy large areas, probably including 5 or 6 landowners. And it's no use you trying to do these holistic principles on your own. You need to get the buy-in of your neighbors, farmers unions, and this is where the stewardship program can greatly contribute towards getting people in a conservation area to work together and practice the same principles, and it will be to the benefit of all of you. So if we look at the road ahead and also what we have achieved until now, if I look back 3 years ago, it was a difficult road that we've walked with the producers' organizations, and there was a lot of conflict and a lot of red faces and fists in the air. But I think if we look back, I think we've achieved quite a lot. We've got the user organizations to follow codes of best practices, all of them. And through the Predation Management Forum, there's a National Predation Management Forum, and we've got one in each province, where CapeNature is a member of that forum. But on national level, we've just never stopped with the holistic principles and teaching them. And I think people started to listen. The pressure from the consumer side to have a product that is produced in a environmental friendly way also absolutely supported what we've reached. And it's amazing to look back and see what we have achieved and where we are today. So all the role players, the suppliers, the red meat producers organization, national wool growers, the DEF National, the scientists, we all work together to achieve best practices, and it's all based on holistic management. We're trying to create a culture of sustainable, holistic management with producers. And there are incentives for farmers who practice these principles in terms of special prices that they get for their products. And I think there's still a lot more that can be done. And eventually, we strive towards a more healthy, environmentally friendly product for our consumers. And we really value the good research that was stimulated in the last couple of years. And we use the information coming from that research to inform better management on the ground. We implement those actions. And yeah, that's my first presentation. Thank you. Are there any questions?